Peter Hazelrigg is our presenter for today, and Peter's I don't know how long Peter's been part of the Presbyterian Coach Network, but he is also, as the material said, the co-founder of Pilgrimage Professional Development Group, and they do leadership consulting and coaching, leadership development, assessment. I've known Peter since our days in campus ministry together some years ago. Note that neither of us are doing that now, but I think we both enjoyed it back then. Peter brings us what is to me a really timely topic. If like me, you have found your balance shaken a bit, as I certainly have, as well as in working with coaching clients. The pandemic has unbalanced all kinds of things. We've been doing a series called Unraveled in our worship program, and unraveled, unbalanced are words I think that are helpful. And so Peter brings us a program about the balance equation, which is something that they've developed, a process, a series of disciplines and mindsets, and he's going to present that to us today. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter. Peter, do you need me to make you co-host so you can do any slides or?
Yeah, I do have some slides, so that would be helpful.
Let me do that. And you should be good to go.
Good, thanks. Well, let me give a brief introduction about where this work comes from. So over the last 10, 12 years, as we have been in practice, a lot of the content that we have developed for our leadership development process comes from our executive coaching work with clients. And part of this comes from the experience of just being a modern professional. And so I want to walk you through the first of 3 steps in our balance equation process today, and give you a couple of specific exercises that you might use for yourself, but also that you might use with clients as you think about this idea of balance. We intentionally don't refer to work-life balance because there's no such thing as having an equal balance between those two things, but finding a sense of overall well-being and balance regardless of how you choose to divvy up that time. But that overall sense of feeling balanced is the goal of our process. So let me pull that up. All right, can everyone see the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I want to start with a question for you and do a little visual explorer here. So using the photograph on the screen, I'd like you to answer a question using this picture. So the question is, what does it feel like for you to be a modern professional? So as you look at that picture, find something in there that helps you to describe what it feels like to be a modern professional. Feel free to unmute yourself and share. Give us an idea. What does that picture bring up for you?
The rush.
A rush, okay. Yeah. What else?
I have this sense of trying to look down at like my phone or messages, but also then be aware of everything that's going around me, off in the distance too. So close.
Yeah. So yeah, sort of that balance of focus of the device and the setting that I'm in and where I'm going, that we have lots of things that we have to attend to. Yeah. What else?
Movement. People are not staying put. They're going here and there on their own direction.
Yeah, busy, moving, sometimes a flurry of activity, some people describe it. Yeah. What else? What else do you see?
The blurriness, making sure you can keep your boundaries or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Blurry
that
people.
Blur of where is the boundary between between work and personal life, between people. But yeah, that sense of where is the boundary in all of this that we're in. Sure. Yeah.
That picture makes me think of competing for space.
Okay. Yeah. Competing for space. What kind of space are you thinking of when you say that?
Professional space, personal space, space in time, space in your attention and your attention and just your soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Peter, could
Yeah.
you maybe turn off presenter view and then we can see that picture larger? Because right now we're seeing that and then the
Oh,
next.
are you seeing the wrong? You're seeing
Yeah,
the
we're seeing
wrong
presenter.
presenter.
Thank you.
That's really great. Now I need to figure out how to swap displays. How about that?
There we go.
Oh, wonderful.
Yep. Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah, the traffic lights take my attention, all the different, the yellow, the red, the green. You know, what are the indicators of where we are, where I'm going, where we are as a group going? What do we have to do? Think about, what are we cautious about stopping for, going ahead?
Yeah, one of the people I did this with a couple of days ago said, I'm getting mixed signals, right? There's green light, there's yellow light, there's red light, all in that same view, right?
I think for me, I'm seeing this being part of a social continuum without any apparent structure and stimulus coming from almost every quarter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that description, stimulus coming from every quarter, right? It's a very noisy scene in some ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My poor introvert is feeling quite overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the symptoms that I hear most frequently from the professionals that we work with. There's a sense of being a bit overwhelmed, a bit of, I'm in a hurry. I always seem to be in a hurry. Maybe I feel a little behind a good bit of the time, right? What do you think is the biggest complaint or the thing that people say they wish they had more of as a modern professional? What do you hear from your clients?
An exit ramp.
An exit ramp? Okay.
Time.
Yeah. Yeah. Time tends to be the piece, right? We're in a hurry because of time. We have to monitor multiple inputs because of time. I'm connected to the phone and I'm trying to be in present in the place where I am because I feel like I don't have enough time, right? And that often begins where we pick up with the balance equation, is this sense of, I feel like I'm a little behind or a little overwhelmed. And often the culprit is time. But the thing we know about time that seems so obvious, and yet sometimes we forget, is that time is a constant. Our friend here taught us that. And yet time is the thing that we keep either blaming or wanting more of, or when I have it, somehow I'm going to catch time because when I have time, then I will work on that next project. But part of this is to help reframe and say, you know, time is a constant, so we're not going to get any more. You have the same 168 hours that everyone else does. But the variable here really are the transactions that you engage in that time. So let me put that another way. Some people experience that they have plenty of time to do what they need to do. And some people describe that they never have enough time to do what they need to do. More accurately, that some people have the appropriate number of transactions to complete within the time available. And some people have too many transactions to complete. So this begins the first piece of the balance equation, is helping leaders and professionals to find a sense of transactional efficiency. So the first part of the balance equation is transactional efficiency. And so by that, we mean transactions being the all of the things that you engage in, the tasks and the behaviors that you go through all day. If you have a meeting, that's a transaction. If you spend 20 minutes doing email, that's a series of little transactions. The errands that you run, all of those things are transactions that take up time. So it's the stuff of our daily work. Efficiency then is the ratio of useful work performed to the total energy expended. So if we are trying to create transactional efficiency, it means that we have the right number of transactions to perform given the time that we have available. So that's what we're trying to help people get to. Let's see if I can, don't seem to be advancing here. Hang on, there we go. So there's a lot of research about balance, about work-life balance, about efficiency, and a lot of the research comes down to fairly simple but consistent themes of what do people do that feel like they have enough time to get all of their work done, to have that sense of balance, to not go to bed worried about what's coming, or feeling like I have to stay up extra late or get up extra early in order to increase the amount of time for the transactions that I need. So we'll share that. I always leave people right here. So this is the silver bullet, and you'll probably be slightly disappointed with the answer. So two of the studies that we looked at, David Allen's book, Getting Things Done, Lauren Vanderkam's work in her book, 168 Hours, both come down to, someone seems to keep going backwards here, comes down to three main disciplines. The first is that they delegate and they outsource. They get off of their plate and give to other people tasks that need to be completed. So a pastor or an executive that really knows how to utilize the administrative assistant. That's one way in which we might delegate. Outsourcing, the difference between delegating and outsourcing, delegating means it's still sort of tethered to me, I'm still responsible for it. Outsourcing means I literally am giving that to someone else and it's now their responsibility. I talked to a pastor the other day, and I asked, how are you trying to get more of that reflection time for yourself? What would be helpful? And he finally decided, as we talked through this, that one of the things he was going to outsource was the lawn mowing. He spent a great deal of time mowing his lawn, and he outsourced that to the neighborhood high school student who lived down the street. And he said it was the most satisfying Saturday that he'd had in a long time, as he just sipped his cup of coffee and looked out the window as someone else mowed the lawn. That's outsourcing. I'm literally giving it to somebody else to do. The second discipline is minimizing, delaying, and deferring non-urgent tasks. So I'll give you an example. Many of you have been working from home. Some of you in your offices or other places of work still have landlines with voicemail. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you walk in and you realize, oh, there's a voice message here. It didn't come to my cell phone. And it's a week old, and you listen to it and it's somebody looking for something. And when you call them back, you say, oh, I'm so sorry, I just got your message. And they respond, oh, that was so last week, I've forgotten about that and I've moved on. That sometimes just the discipline of delaying or deferring certain tasks, they either take care of themselves or we are able to push them off until a time where we do have the available bandwidth to deal with it. But that becomes differentiating between what is really pressing for me to do and urgent now versus something that I might be able to do at a later point in time. We'll talk a little bit more about the difference between urgent and important in a minute. But the third discipline that they talk about is just this idea of saying no. right? Of being really clear of what is it that is mine to do and what is it that I might say no to. Even if it's something that I'm capable of doing, maybe it's not something that I need to engage in. And really thinking about what are those things that we might say no to. So I'm going to stop here for a second. I'm curious what in here triggers questions for you or things that you're wondering about or reflections at this moment of if this is the silver bullet, is this exciting to you or does this seem a little too simple?
This is Janice. It strikes me as simple, profound, and true, and yet in my own experience in congregational ministry and in many of the clients I coach in the same situation, there is either a real or perceived real conflict around being able to do these things and set appropriate healthy boundaries and the unreasonable expectations of either the congregation as a whole or specific individuals who speak loudly.
Right, absolutely. And not to foreshadow too much, but the second part of the balance equation is boundary setting, right? So it is a really important piece of where do I draw the boundaries that are going to allow me to sustain a certain amount of balance. The real hard part, and this goes with both saying no, but establishing boundaries more generally, and I always try and instill this with folks, is that part of having balance is to anticipate that we will somewhere be disappointing to someone, right? I always say that the system has disappointment built into it. The question is, where is it going to fall? I can satisfy everyone's needs, and then the person that ends up being disappointed is me because I didn't get any downtime or I'm exhausted because of my own choices. I chose to go to work for an evening meeting, and that means I chose not to have dinner with my family, and there's disappointment there. But all of the choices we make, somewhere there's some disappointment. So part of boundary setting, in addition to being clear about the things that we value and that are important, is also being prepared that there will be disappointment somewhere in the saying no process. Yeah, absolutely. Other things that this is sparking for them as they think about this?
This is Olivia, and for me, it's I agree with what you're saying wholeheartedly, but then you have the person who just can't disappoint anybody, or they can't delegate. They just have that control issue.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, it's not a thing they can do.
Yeah.
How to work with that.
Yeah, they have a hard time disappointing others, and yet they realize that they disappoint themselves fairly often, which is sort of the interesting piece, right? That there is disappointment there. It's just they're choosing that for themselves, consciously or unconsciously. Part of this, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, we refer to it as the small recoverable experiment. What's something that I might try? Maybe I think it's going to be disappointing, but I'm not really sure. I've never tried it. I've never said no to that. What would happen if I tried that? And how do we get a little bit more data? Because oftentimes it's the perception that I'm going to be disappointing, or the perception that I'm needed, rather than the reality. And sometimes we actually need to test that so that we can find out whether that's true or not. But I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, the idea of a small recoverable experiment. So let me move on. I want to share this with you as a practice, and this is something that you can use for yourself or you can use with clients. As we start to think about becoming transactionally efficient, the first piece is we have to have a good accounting of how people are spending their time. when I start working with someone through the balance equation, one of the first things I have them do is what we refer to as a transactional audit. For a week or 2 weeks, I have them at the end of the day account for all of their time in 30-minute blocks. Literally go through the end of your day and write down, you know, I got up this morning, first 30 minutes was walking the dog, and then breakfast, and I walk all the way through the day. And I have them have to account for it. What you will find is most people, if you look at their calendars show them things that involve other people, meetings, or things where other people are involved. But then the rest of their work falls in the spaces in between, and it's sort of empty. So we want to help them see graphically, how am I spending my time? I find fairly quickly after the end of a week, I'll have a call with a client and I'll say, what are you noticing about your patterns and your behaviors? And they quickly already have found a couple of things that they go, gosh, you know, in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have spent my time that way. And they start to be able to see it a little bit differently. So just the accountability of having to document what I did with my time helps us to think a little more critically of, well, how did that happen? Did I schedule that? Did I say yes to it and I should have said no? But they start to think a little bit more consciously about what does their day include. The second step of that is then I have them take those items. I usually have them number them in 30-minute increments. And then I have them take that number and then I have them place it on this grid. Was that transaction, that thing I was engaged in, was it urgent and important? Urgent is relative timeliness. So I have a deadline at 5 o'clock to turn in my article for the newsletter. That is relatively urgent because there is a time deadline and it's fairly close. Importance is the relative impact of that task. So sometimes we conflate these two as being the same. Urgent equals important, but I would argue that this is part of the perception challenge. Someone who sends you an email and says, hey, I'd like to talk to you, you know, when you have a chance, would you email me some times? You're likely to email them back and pick a time off in the future where you feel comfortable scheduling an hour conversation. So that's different than the person standing and knocking at your office door and saying, hey, can we talk about something? It's no more urgent than it was via email, but because they're standing there in front of you, they present as being more urgent. So sometimes this is the discipline of saying, is that something I need to say? I'm happy to, but not right now. Is that something that I might delay for a later date? Or is it truly something that is high importance that needs to be dealt with now? But thinking about that difference between urgency and importance. So once they have taken those things and they've thought about it and they've plotted it onto this graph, what are the things that I did that were kind of low urgency and low importance? I was just piddling, right? I got sucked into an email chain. It really didn't have a lot of value, but it took a lot of time. But was it urgent? No, it presented as urgent because it said ding and there was a little red mark. And I don't like red marks showing up on my phone. So I went to see what it was, right? These are all the ways in which our digital devices get us to make you feel like it's urgent, even though it's not. So once they have put them all on here, then I walk through this and say, so of those 3 disciplines, here are some suggestions. Of those things that are in the lower low urgency, low importance in that bottom left-hand box. What are the things in there is it possible for you to ignore or say no to? Is there anything in that box that would fall into that category? So that's the challenge to them is, looking at those things that fall in that box, could I say no to it? Could I ignore it? Of the things that are in the upper left-hand corner, they seem to be timely, but not all that impactful. They don't have that much importance or weight. Is that something that, yes, it needs to get done, but maybe it could get done by somebody else? It's still, the lawn needs to get mowed before it gets so long I can't run a lawnmower through it, but that doesn't mean that it has to be me. Who is it that would find that useful work, that would be happy to do that? Does it have to be me? I often ask, the pastors that I work with, does it require ordination in order to do that task? Maybe that's a good place to start. Does it take a paid professional to do that? Is there a volunteer or a committee or something else where that task might fall? So that becomes part of the question. Now, most people will find that they've got a good number of things in this top right, which is, it is important, it is impactful, and it's urgent. This is the tactical management tasks. Sometimes this is crisis management, things that show up here that I really can't control, but are very impactful. My wife has 2 funerals to do this week. Those things fall in that urgent and important. It's timely now. It is impactful. It is something that she needs to do. She can't delegate that to someone else. So those are the things that fall up there. What I also encourage people to think about is the place where you really are going to start adding additional value and feeling like you're getting ahead of things is this bottom right-hand column. This important but not urgent. There's no problem if it doesn't happen today or even this week. But it is the place where strategy happens. What are we going to look like in the future? What are the things that we want to start working towards? Not because they're due this week or next month, but because a year from now, it would be really important to be moving in that direction. Development of staff, right? For those that are overseeing and being a supervisor for others, there are the sort of practical day-to-day management things that need to get done, but then there's really the how do we grow someone's capacity? How do we invest in their development? And that really falls in that bottom right-hand corner, right? My encouragement is to help people to see what is it that's falling on this left-hand side of the equation, and how do we increase the amount of time that is spent on the right-hand side. That's really the goal here, is to start helping people think through more specifically, what is it that I can let go of on that left-hand side? So I'm going to stop there, and I'd like you to think about, as you look at these 4 categories, if you think back just on this week, what is something in hindsight for you that fell on the right-hand side? Low importance, maybe it was low urgency, maybe it was high urgency as it presented itself. But what are some things that if you thought back on it now, you say, gosh, I'm not sure that that was really all that impactful or important? What are things that come to your mind that fall into those 2 buckets? I'm not afraid to pick on people.
I can think of a couple of meetings that were probably not that important.
Okay. Give me an idea of what is it that indicates to you that they were not important in hindsight?
They were basically meet and greet, sort of we found something of mutual interest, and basically I took a chunk of a part of a day to set aside for that, when I did have a couple much more urgent things to take care of.
Okay. Yeah. One of the things, and depending on the work that you do, but certainly I see this with pastors, I see this with a lot of executives, that the number of meetings that they have in a given week, right? You know, someone said to me the other day, I was saying, you know, how do you describe your work to people? And they say, well, I go to a lot of meetings. And they were being sort of tongue in cheek. And yet at the same time, that's true. There is a lot of meeting. And part of what I encourage people to think about is that a meeting that I need to be attending? Is that a meeting that I need to know what happened, but I don't need to be attending? Can I send someone else in my place that might represent whatever it is that I might need to be there for, or simply to take notes? Or is it something that maybe I don't say no, but I decrease my frequency? Maybe it happens every Monday, but what would happen if I only went every other Monday? I'm saying I still want to be part of this. There's still some value, but maybe not as much. Maybe I need to think more carefully about how frequently I arrive at that meeting. Unfortunately, I asked the wrong question to a pastor I was coaching the other day, and I said, what's the meeting that you look at on your calendar and you go, oh, I'm never going to get that time back. I can see it coming and I can't. And what do you think the answer was?
Session.
Close. Presbytery. And I said, well, what happens if you say no to going to presbytery?
Mm.
And they thought about it, and I said, well, I mean, really, if you look at the agenda and say, is there something valuable in there for me or not? And I've encouraged the presbytery executives that I work with, is to really think about, is this important enough for us to meet, or are we meeting because it's the time that we've scheduled? It's the whatever the rhythm is every other month, or the fourth Saturday, or whatever it is. And say that rhythm also has to have meaning, not just time. So let's not waste people's time. Let's make sure that there's something valuable in there. Otherwise, I would encourage people to say, if you sat there and you didn't offer anything and you didn't learn anything, by the time you get to the end, was that really a good use of your time? There's a pastor in my presbytery here in Salem Presbytery that it's really funny. He knows how valuable it is for him. And he shows up just for the valuable part. He comes just before lunch. He meets with people. You can see him working the room. He's connecting with folks, and then he leaves. And I know he's consciously saying, is this going to be a useful time for me to sit here? And if it is, if the agenda items are such that he feels like he has something to add or something to learn, he will stay. If it's a series of 15-minute updates from committees that have no votes attached to them, he simply says, I know what that is. I'm not staying for that. I'll read the minutes later. But I think it's important for us to be thinking about, okay, if we're going to spend the time to meet, is it valuable and impactful? Is it important enough for us to do it, or are we doing it just because? So that becomes a bit of the discipline, is both what are the things I'm letting onto my calendar, but am I also thinking about, of the things that I'm inviting people to, do they really offer something important, something of value, or are we meeting just because? So other thoughts as you're looking through this, things that you would like to add to, if you had an extra couple of hours on your calendar, or a couple of hours that were unaccounted for on your calendar, I should say. Where is the most impactful place to put those? And I would argue it's down here in this strategy, developing others, developing ourselves, our own study, providing real leadership being what is it that's going to change, management being stabilizing what is happening. Leadership is really about the future. That I think a lot of folks, at least that I work with, want to be more impactful in their work. And that usually means the things that would fall into this bottom right-hand bucket. And our hope is that through both some awareness and some accountability, but then also some practices. How can we minimize the things that are on the right hand so that we have more time on our calendar for the bottom right hand corner? All right. So I also want to give you one other way as we work through this to think about not all time is equal, right? So we think about time in sort of these broadly in these three buckets. Productive time is the time where we are executing on tasks. And that takes energy and it takes focus. And all of us have our productive work that we have to do. The challenge is that our little digital devices, you may not know where your keys are right now, but I know you all know where your phone is. Those little digital devices allow us to be productive at any moment, at the spur of the moment. A show of hands. Can we show hands? I think we can show hands. Maybe you can just literally raise your hand. How many of you at some point in the last month, while stopped at a stoplight, have checked your phone? Yeah? Okay. So in a moment that I should be focused on one thing, I'm trying to create productivity, and simply by opening the phone, looking at an email, looking at texts, it allows my brain to start working on the next problem, and I'm being productive. Commutes used to be times to unwind, to reflect, to prepare to arrive wherever I was headed. But now I can leave the office, still tethered to the office, and show up at home and not actually have left the office yet. I'm still on. And I know this because I walk into the house with 12-year-old twins. They had this thing that they started doing when they were about 8. When I would talk on the phone at home, they would come in and kind of like try and get your attention. And they literally started jumping up and down saying, "I'm more interesting. I'm more interesting." But our phones and our digital devices are literally programmed to do that very thing. They say, "I'm more interesting than anything else you're working on. Come and spend time with me. Come and look at the little red dots and the number that's in that red dot, and it'll tell you how much work you have to do." And it drives a lot of our behavior. So it's taking time that might otherwise be restorative or reflective time and makes it productive. If you're reading your mail in bed before you go to bed, if the first thing you do in the morning is pick up your phone and check the mail before you get out of bed, that is being a very responsive to your devices. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's helping you be more effective or efficient. So thinking about, there's a time to be productive and there's a time not to. And part of us turning off our productivity is stepping away from the devices that allow us to be productive so that we might engage in something else. The second time we talk about is referred to as slack time. Slack time is a term that comes out of the Google world, that their software engineers and technicians and folks like that were given a certain percentage of their day for slack time. And they could work on anything they wanted to. It was a time to tinker and think and play without the expectation of being immediately productive. And when they gave people 20% of their working hours as slack time to follow their hunches and interests and to tinker, they found that that's actually where the majority of their new creative ideas came from, was out of slack time, not out of a demand for, we need a new invention, tomorrow, but allowing people to follow their impulses and to imagine without the idea of having to have something productive in the short run. But that's a bit of that creative process. Where do you get to just tinker and think and read and whatever it does for you that allows you to follow your leads and your hunches in your mind? That's a bit of the challenge with the devices, is they can pull us back into productivity mode when we really ought to be thinking and being creative. This is why, right? They always say the great ideas come in the shower, because it's the one place you don't have your device, right? So, and then the last is really this idea of restorative time, downtime, napping, rest, exercise, reflection, walking, that these are as important to the productive time as anything else. If we do not have restorative time, then our productive time is more difficult. It's less efficient. It's less focused. It's less satisfying. So all of these buckets of time, and you can probably identify some others for you as well. Family time probably comes in here. Maybe that's restorative. Maybe that's just family time. But thinking about the variety of buckets. The other discipline that I think is helpful as we talk about transactional efficiency, as we're wondering where we have time to do something, to engage in something. The other discipline I always encourage my clients to do is not to use their calendar just for appointments, but the calendar is really the place that will tell you, when do I have time to do a particular task? If you have a to-do list and an empty calendar, they really need to go together. And I encourage people to do this because it helps them to be more explicit about how they want to spend their time, as opposed to just responding, I've got 3 hours to get work done, but now I can get sucked into email and then I get just sort of into a response mode, but I'm not being very planful about it. I'm working with a pastor right now who this is part of the challenge for him. And I asked him, I said, how in the perfect world would you write your sermon? Do you like to write a little bit on Monday, a little bit on Tuesday, a little bit on Wednesday? Do you like to read on Monday and then sit down on Thursday and write the whole thing from start to finish? How is it that you like to write when you're writing a sermon? And he said, I need 2 chunks. I need the kind of the plant the seed, do the reading and some of the research, and then I need to sit with it for a while and let it percolate. And then I want to write, but when I write, I want to get down and focus. I don't want to get distracted. So he started scheduling his sermon preparation on his calendar. So it was clear to everyone when he was going to do it. It was also the cue to him that it wasn't time to do something else. It wasn't sometime this afternoon I need to work on my sermon. It's not. I'm going to do it between 1 and 3. And really getting disciplined about using the calendar to say, where is it that I have time? If I have a to-do list, the to-do list ought to get placed into calendar blocks, right? Which Saturday am I going to do that home improvement project? Well, instead of just leaving it on the list, literally assign it a time. Obviously, when urgent things come up, we have to rearrange our calendar for those things that are unexpected. But now I know what it is that is being interrupted, and I can move that block of time someplace else, but it's still accounted for. It also takes the responsibility of trying to remember all of those things that I need to do, right, out of my head, and it's actually accounted for on the calendar. That becomes the second discipline about getting really intentional about what are the transactions that we're engaging in? What are the time blocks that I need to do the transactions I know I want to engage in? And becoming a little less of a response machine, just whatever comes in via email, just whatever impulse happens today, or getting distracted by the news and texts and other things, but really to become intentional about how is it that I want to construct my day. So those 2 disciplines, the accounting for our time and doing a bit of that urgent and important evaluation in hindsight, being planful about our calendars so that there is time to do those urgent and important things, those management things that need to get done. The newsletter has to get done. It has a timeline, it has value. And then also, where is the time where I'm going to work on the important but not urgent, the things that will make a difference 6 months from now or a year from now? Where do those fall on my calendar? because oftentimes those are the ones that get missed in the response cycle that we're in. So all of this, hopefully, the end goal of becoming a bit more transactionally efficient as the first part of the balance equation, just helps people realize that they have more power than they think they do to control what happens in their week, that they have control over their schedules. They do have the ability to outsource certain things, to say no to certain things, to delay them until such a time where they want to deal with it. But all of this is to give a sense of empowerment, that we actually can control more of our schedule than we often think we can. So I will stop at that point and ask for responses or questions as you are thinking about this. Are there, does this create for you the thought of something that you might do differently? As you think about that list of things that you've done over the last week, what's something that you might like to try and do differently to find a little bit more balance for you?
I like the notion of structuring slack time, because I think all too often I feel like I'm stealing it, and I think it somehow cheapens it in a way. I don't really value it as much as I really should, because I depend a lot on that slack time for my creativity and new thinking.
Yeah. One of my clients referred to it as, they said, it's a little like jazz, right? In the middle of the song, there will be, 12 bars of improvisation, right? But it's scheduling time not to have structure, but it's sort of the structure of having unstructured time, right? That it's dedicated, it's predictable. It probably is something that if I can sort of look forward to whatever it is, Wednesday mornings or whenever I've structured that I can look forward to that sort of, that slack time experience. But it's hard to come by, and sometimes it can feel a little guilty for taking advantage of it. But to say, no, it's actually really important. It's really a high value time.
I think, Peter, you said something that I think is awfully important, and that was that word guilt. When I was an exec, at the end of my time, I didn't go to COM all the time anymore. I went for a portion of each meeting, and I felt guilty as all get out for that, because COM is very important. And now retrospectively, I think that was one of the smartest things I ever did. But I hear from my clients too, as they're not doing, that they feel guilty.
Yes, yes. And I think this is, this is part of the ongoing coaching. Is we can sort of like the idea of it, but then there's the, how does it feel when I actually do it? Part of that question really is to say, it's not that COM is not important. It is very important, and it has important work to do. Is it important that I am there for it, for all of it, right? Is that the important work that I have to do uniquely, or is it something that I need to be a part of, and I need to be available when my piece is required? But can we trust that group is going to do its work? But yeah, the sense of a bit of guilt of, gosh, I could go, I've gone before. Will they miss me if I'm not there? Am I not doing my job if I'm not there? I think those are all pieces of the question that people have to wrestle with. But certainly to say, it's not that it's not important. Is it the best use of my time right now? Right? Yeah.
Peter, I resonate with how important it is to put your accomplishments and your goals on the calendar. And I've had that experience in working with my clients and saying, how many of the appointments you have written on your calendar do you actually miss? And it's very rare that they ever miss an appointment they've written with someone else. How many of your own accomplishments or goals are on your calendar? Well, have you made an appointment with yourself? Well, not actually.
Yeah.
And, you know, I look at my own Presbyterian wall calendar here, and I have very minimal things that are meetings with myself. And so there's a bit of, you know, reminder to, you know, kind of live by the rules that I work with others, and the importance that, well, just because it's in my head doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Absolutely. And the flip side is also true sometimes. I have some folks that I work with that they're very clear about what their own agenda is and what they want to move forward. And yet the thing that they need to schedule is, where is the development time for the people that you supervise, right? Have you been intentional about not just getting the work done and getting things to happen, but are you really investing in their growth and development as part of your role if you're supervising folks? So everyone has a different thing that they're likely to skip if it's not scheduled, right? Or that they can easily say, oh, I'll get to that, you know, again, when I have time. But it's that putting off of the important things and really not building for the future. At some point, the things that are important but not urgent bubble up to the top, and they became both urgent and important. And that's a bit of the manufactured crisis, right? Which is, had I dealt with it planfully in another way earlier, it wouldn't have bubbled up to being urgent and important. But so time spent in that intentional space of importance will keep us from some crisis, right? Other thoughts?
I was struck by the you know, we choose to disappoint ourselves instead of disappointing others. That stuck with me.
Yeah, it's really an interesting one when someone realizes that, right? When they say, I don't want to, you know, I'm a people pleaser. I don't want to let people down. And I said, well, you have. It's just not any of the other people. It's you. And you know, sometimes it just takes that someone to hold up the mirror and say, you seem to be disappointed for yourself. It's not what you wanted, or I don't want to be this tired, or I don't want to be this stretched. That they realize, oh, I made the unconscious choice to disappoint myself in the midst of that. And that can be a really powerful awakening when they realize that, okay, yeah, my saying yes to something was also an implicit no to something else, right? That's a bit of the balance equation too.
Yes. Would you be willing to share that time audit sheet?
Sure, yeah. I'll, Dana, can I send that to you for distribution?
Sure thing, yep.
Yeah, I'll send that, and then the grid that goes along with it for the second piece. Yeah, happy to do that. Good. Well, thank you for your interest in allowing me to share a little bit of my work today. Always good to be with colleagues, and appreciate the time. But with that, I'll hand it back to Dana.